I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day. Pretty much the title. My spouse, 26, and I, 27, got married earlier this year, hooray. The ceremony was extremely small and personal, and it was all we could ask for. Unfortunately, this is where the good times, with the family, not my spouse, ended. Here's some backstory. My spouse's brother, referred to as Steve in the rest of the post, is 32 years old. He was a delivery driver for years until he unexpectedly quit. He was in and out of jobs for a couple of years until landing a DoorDash gig. No shade to any job, money is money at the end of the day. Steve knew about the trip for at least 4 months. He lives at home with his parents, and has little to no bills. Despite all of this, Steve did not save any money for the trip and admitted to spending his money on vapes and weed. In fact, Steve began the trip bragging that his bank account balance was $25 in the negative. This will be relevant later. Here's what happened. Our wedding was in a tourist location known for various liquor and wine tastings. The night before our ceremony, my mother-in-law, family friend, spouse, and I went on a bar crawl. Safe to say we all were pleasantly intoxicated, not enough to be a nuisance, but enough to stumble back to our hotel. Notably absent from this night out was my spouse's brother, 32, Steve. The next day, the day of the wedding, as I mentioned, went swimmingly until the evening. In celebration of our nuptials, we decided as a family that it was booze cruise night too. The original entourage, MIL, family friend, spouse, myself, was joined by my new brother-in-law, Steve. It is important to note that Steve had zero money to his name, and since drinking costs money, he was freeloading on this booze cruise. The original group did not drink as heavily this time. We were sufficiently buzzed, but not stumbling drunk. We decided to cut ourselves off, as responsible drinkers do, and this is where the night began to turn. It was when we decided to cease drinking that Steve grew grumpy. He moaned, "I wish I would have been there the first night, only, he was there. He chose not to tag along because tourist towns suck." Steve then tried to pressure the rest of us to continue drinking. After continuous refusals, we convinced Steve it was time for dinner and a nightcap. We were seated at the restaurant. We all ordered water, and then we had our individual drink orders. I ordered a glass of wine, my spouse ordered a cocktail, and Steve ordered a shot of Jack Daniels and a beer. Reminder, he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab. When our waters arrived, my spouse shot a paper straw wrapper at Steve, then Steve returned the favor. Then our specialty drinks arrived. My spouse then grabbed the extra straw that came with their drink and shot an additional wrapper at Steve. All hell broke loose. Steve yelled, "If I can't get you back, then you can't shoot me with a straw wrapper." He then downed the Jack Daniels, aggressively threw the glass across the table and into the appetizer trays. Fortunately, nothing broke, but the noise brought the entire world to a standstill. Steve stormed off, and that was the last we saw of him that night. You would think this is where the story ends, but my spouse and I caught up with MIL the next morning, and she filled us in on what transpired. The rest is per MIL's recollection when we grabbed breakfast at 8 a.m. the next day. Apparently, before the booze cruise, MIL gave Steve petty cash for knickknacks and drinks so that he could pay for things himself. Remember, Steve didn't pay for a single tasting. So, what did he do with the money he squirreled away? Well, after Steve stormed out of the restaurant, he drank himself into oblivion. He was so inebriated that my MIL received a call at 3 in the morning from a local bar telling her to pick up Steve before they called the cops. My MIL then got out of bed, woke up my FIL, who has ailing health and mobility issues, picked Steve up and headed back to the hotel. However, as they were nearing the hotel, Steve escaped. We don't know whether he jumped out of the car or fled from the bar on foot. Nevertheless, he ran down an alley, rolled his ankle, lost his shoes and his phone. He was then coaxed back into the car and finally put to bed at 4 in the morning. The next day he left, and my spouse and I have refused to talk to him ever since. A week later, my spouse received an apology text from Steve in which he stated that he was blackout drunk at the restaurant. I doubt this, as there were no other signs of that level of drunkenness, and he regretted his actions. He also stated that his biggest regret was not ruining our wedding night, but yelling at his mom. While both are awful, his need to include that in his apology made the whole message ring hollow. We have not replied to him since. TLDR, on the night of my wedding, my BIL got drunk, made a fool of himself and ruined the mood of what was supposed to be a wonderful night. Let me analyze this story for you. This story, "I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day," is, on the surface, about an intoxicated and immature man disrupting a meaningful night. But just under the surface, it's about something deeper, the pain of watching someone willfully choose self-destruction and drag others down with them, and doing it on the one night that was supposed to be untouchable. At its core, this is a story of betrayal and resentment disguised as party chaos. Steve is not just a bad guest. He is a ticking bomb of entitlement, arrested development, and unresolved frustration, and the narrator makes it clear from the beginning, this wasn't a sudden meltdown. This was a long time coming. The night of the wedding just gave him the stage. Let's unpack this. Steve is 32, older than everyone else involved, yet shows the least maturity. He had months of notice about the trip, zero major responsibilities, and still showed up flat broke, not even a token attempt to participate like an adult. That's not harmless, that's passive exploitation, banking on others to carry him without consequence. His refusal to join the group on the first night, then sulking that he wasn't part of it, reveals the deep entitlement and martyrdom that define his personality. He wants inclusion without effort, reward without engagement. When the group stops drinking, he doesn't just get moody, he gets manipulative. His push to keep the party going wasn't about fun. It was about control. He didn't like that others were calling it a night because it reminded him that he wasn't the center of the experience. The straw wrapper incident wasn't the cause of the outburst, it was the excuse. The pressure had already been building, and that moment gave him the perfect justification to turn a petty grievance into a public tantrum. His outburst, slamming a glass across the table, storming off, wasn't about straws. It was about resentment and humiliation at not being the one everyone was orbiting. This story is also about grief. Not of death, but of hope. Weddings aren't just rituals, they're emotional tipping points. They don't just add someone new to the family, they expose everything that's already wrong. And here, the narrator is realizing, this man is not just inconsiderate, he is incapable of being part of their future. The details that follow, the 3 a.m. rescue call, the drunken escape, the injury, the lost phone, the parents dragged from bed to handle their grown son, these aren't funny anymore. They're tragic. The way Steve's self-destruction forces his aging, ill father to get up and help him like a toddler shows just how corrosive his behavior is. He doesn't just hurt himself, he bleeds into everyone else's peace. And perhaps the most quietly painful piece of the story, Steve's apology. "I was blackout drunk" is a dodge. The narrator doesn't believe it, and neither do we. His biggest regret being that he yelled at his mom, not the people whose wedding he disrupted, is telling. Even in apology, Steve centers himself and his selective guilt. It's a selfish confession dressed as remorse. The narrator and their spouse's decision to go no contact after the text isn't vindictive. It's protective. Not out of hate, but out of love for each other, and a need to keep their future safe from someone who will always find a way to ruin the moment. Stylistically, the story is told with rising tension and pointed detail. It begins with humor and a casual tone, but that tone shifts expertly as the events spiral out. The narrator uses light sarcasm and parentheticals, "Reminder he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab," to emphasize the absurdity, but by the time we reach the 3 a.m. bar call, the mood has turned. What began as a cringy family anecdote has morphed into a portrait of a family hostage to one man's immaturity. This is a story about the final straw, both literal and metaphorical. A wedding night ruined by a grown child in a man's body. And a newlywed couple who now realize that some people do not deserve second chances just because they share blood. This isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. And it's about time.